businesses from the time I was a little kid. And yet I had no idea that I would end up doing a number of entrepreneurial kind of efforts. I was in college and not knowing what I wanted to do and decided to take a year off and sort of test a bunch of different things. And I did the motorcycle drive across the U.S., and I was a janitor, and I tried to sell insurance, and I tried to sell pots and pans. And I ended up at the White House. And I ended up at the White House in the Nixon administration during the end of the Vietnam War. And I, frankly, was as opposed to the Vietnam War as anybody could be, though I grew up an Army brat. So my father was working in the Pentagon through much of the war and actually served in Vietnam. I was a supporter, as a lot of people are now, of the troops in Iraq, but, you know, I wasn't for the cause. Anyway, I ended up at the White House. And, you know, I had sort of, you know, having a White House badge when you're 20 years old, I had access to any place in Washington that I wanted to go. The White House is very powerful during the Nixon administration, and I took advantage of it because I love political theory. But I ended up at a party with a bunch of people who were from the Justice Department. All were attorneys at the Justice Department. And this woman came up to me early on in the party, and she said, "What do you do?" And I had just left the White House, and I was working now in this tire shop. And I said, "Well, I'm working in a tire shop." I didn't want to give her the details that actually I owned the business. And about 20 minutes later, she came back and asked why I dropped out of high school as a sophomore. And so I was just found it very curious, the sort of conclusion that was reached very quickly. But that got me more interested in doing what I was doing, which was counter to almost everything I had done. Because when I was at the White House, I started dating a woman whose younger brother was making twice as much money as I was in this prestigious position, putting tires on cars. And this kid was, you know, barely staying in high school. You know, all his friends were criminals. And he's making legitimately twice as much money as me. And so the next year I decided as a lark I would get a job in a tire shop. And the other part that was funny was I've been tested in science and math and all that. And I'm sure a lot of us in this room scored highly in those kinds of tests, and I did too. I scored the lowest 3 percentile in mechanical reasoning. You know, I mean, it took me half the test just to figure out the strings to undo to open the thing up. I can't change a light bulb, and I still have that. So I found it interesting that you know, to find myself in a tire shop, but you know, after about 18 months after I had the tire shop, I ended up opening my first tire shop around Washington, D.C. on the first day of exam period of my senior year in college. My college was in Massachusetts. I opened a store in Washington, D.C. Within 6 months, I had 6 locations surrounding Washington, D.C. 3 in Maryland, 3 in Virginia. And within another year, I had another 3 locations. And, you know, from there, you know, that business went for a while. I realized that for a variety of technical reasons, the business wasn't going to continue to go on. We were making a lot of money. The company that we were partnering with wasn't making money. And so those types of relationships, this is free in terms of not your 10 important things in the lecture, but if you're making a lot and your partner's not, it isn't going to work after a while. I don't care if it's a marriage or a business or joint venture or anything. And so we started looking for another place to go, and we ended up finding Northern California at about this time of the year. And the weather was like it is back east right now, and we came out here, it was 60-some degrees, and we said, hey, this is where we want to move. And so ended up opening Wheelworks, and to make a long story short, built it to about 25 stores, and it was 15th largest in the U.S., but it was most productive per square foot of any shop or group of stores in the tire business in the U.S. And we sold it to a company that was 5th largest in the U.S., which made us 3rd largest in the U.S. together. And in the next 20 months, I took over as president, and we ended up growing into the biggest in the U.S. We ended up in 25 states. We went from think there were 2,500 employees, ended up with 6,000 employees when I left. So I left that industry, which I, again, still have a 3%, lowest 3 percentile in mechanical reasoning aptitude. It didn't go up at all in 20-some years. And I ended up getting involved with a foundation, with a golf association, that had about $30,000 in assets and was raising $10,000, $15,000 from a bunch of guys. And in a couple of years, it became a multi-million-dollar foundation. And it's in Northern California, providing free or very low-cost golf to underprivileged kids and giving away over $1 million in free rounds of golf balls and stuff like that. The idea is to get kids, instead of hanging around shopping centers and malls and video games all day, to be able to get out and learn about partnering, following rules, learning how to add the numbers up to keep scores, etc. And so, again, I did that because it was another thing. It was something to give away, but it was just another whole thing to sort of put together this concept of a foundation, which, you know, in a volunteer arena, very different than the business arena. And then again, to do something completely different, in which everybody in my company will testify, I have a very low aptitude, that's smart village. I can work email relatively well, but everything else I can't do. But anyway, here's a few things I did learn. I want to start off by asking, how many people here are not good with percentages? Okay, 1, 2, 3, about 5 people left. Most of you are pretty good with percentages, because I want to talk to you about, you call it the 3% theorem. And this 3% theorem came out of a story of two guys graduated from the same high school. One was at the top of his class. He ended up going to Stanford. And the other was at the bottom of their class. The one at the top of the class got out of Stanford and then got into Harvard and got their MBA from Harvard, and then got out of Harvard and ended up working for the Bank of America, your favorite bank. And after 20 years at the Bank of America, they were a vice president of the Bank of America. Now, Bank of America probably has about 3,000 vice presidents, but another vice president, and one of the jobs in moving to the next level of vice president is to go back in a branch and work for a few weeks and get back to the people, so to speak. And so in working in the branch as vice president, at the end of the first week, noticed that this guy comes in at the end of the day and he's standing there making a deposit, it looks like, and all the tellers are over there and they're laughing and talking and chatting with the guy, and everybody's really excited. And the person leaves, and this guy goes around and he says, "Who was that? And what was that about?" He said, "Oh, that's Bill Johnson. He's a really nice guy. And he deposits $10 million every week. He brings a cashier's check and puts it in a checking account." And I goes, "Bill Johnson, that's interesting." So goes back, works the next week. Friday afternoon comes around again. The big noise is over there. He looks up. He's been working on some auditing stuff. And there's that guy again. And he thinks he recognizes him, going, "That's Bill Johnson from the high school. That was the dumbest guy in our class. Graduated at the bottom of his class. What the heck's going on?" He's 10 million, goes over again. They said, "Yeah, that's Bill Johnson. He's such a nice person." And he put another $10 million in his checking account. So he says, "Well, I'm going to have to catch him the next week." So the next week, Bill Johnson comes in. He watches him do the deposit. He goes out and cuts him off. He says to him, "Are you Bill Johnson from Los Gatos High School or whatever?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you know, I'm Rahul Conan. I was the smartest guy in our class. Do you remember that?" And Bill goes, "Yeah, I remember. You were the smart. You were valedictorian, weren't you? Didn't you go to Stanford? Yeah. And then I heard you went to Harvard. Yeah. And how's it going at the Bank of America?" "It was going really good, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "But I understand that you've become very successful too, Bill. What's going on?" He says, "Well, I started this little business and, you know, it's working really well." He said, "Well, what do you think is the secret to your business?" He said, "Well, I think I figured out how to make money on a 3% margin." And Rahul's thinking, "I still you can't make 3% on 3. Is that in the revenue in the retail business?" "Yeah." 3%. You can't make money on a 3% margin. Your rent's got to be at least 5%. He's thinking, something's going on, something's wrong. He says, how do you make money on a 3% margin? Bill says it's really easy. You buy it for $1 and you sell it for $3. 3%. So that's the first lesson. You don't have to understand percentages to make money in business, okay? You just have to understand how much to buy it for and how much to sell it for, right? So next thing is, I was really lucky. When I got into the first business back in Washington, D.C., I was telling you about that woman I was dating and her little brother who was making all this money. Well, he ended up getting me a job in this tire shop. And, you know, he was making some money, but the way you really made money was on tips and all this stuff. And we had some weeks where we weren't doing well. It would be 95 degrees out in D.C., and we weren't making any, you know, we'd get to the end of the week and we had no money. And so there was like a Thursday, the day before the paycheck, we had zero money. We worked all morning. We got $5 in tips. And Rick and I went to lunch. And so we decided to go to this place, Marie Callender's, which I think they still have some around here. It's a pie place, right? Well, it was a pie place in the 70s also. And we went there, and we said, okay, we're going to get $5 worth of pie. That's what we're going to have for lunch. So we bought the pie, and Rick went and cut the pie in half, okay? And I look at it, and it's a little bit bigger. You know how it is? One side's a little bit bigger than the other. And Rick cuts it in half, and he hands me the bigger piece. And it just struck me that that's how Rick always was. Rick always would give the bigger piece to the other person. He just didn't think about it. And, you know, I made a lot of mistakes in dating, but I tell you what, in terms of picking a partner, I learned a very simple lesson, which is, you know, find a person who's going to give the bigger half away. So, you know, that's my lesson. Go out, buy a piece of pie, let the other person cut it in half, or something like that in terms of picking a partner, because I was a partner with Rick for over 27 years, and in 27 years, I never once had to go look in the checkbook and wonder if maybe Rick took some money out, because we both could sign. Never once did it even occur to me that he might have taken more than me. In fact, most of the time, Rick and I were in competition to see who could give more, you know, who could work a little harder. You know, if we both got trips from vendors, you know, and one trip would be to Indianapolis for 3 days, and the other trip would be to Paris for a week. You know, who could first offer the trip to Paris to the other person? And that's what I would recommend that you do. You know, it isn't necessarily the smartest person. You know, Rick didn't go to college, and a lot of people said I should have been this and that. But you know what? We had a tremendous partnership for 27 years. And you know, if you've got any questions like that at all, I recommend you get out of the business. In fact, a number of us worked together, and we had somebody else in the business, and we had some questions, and we ended that relationship and resolved that business. It's just not worth it. It's just too hard. There's 3 types of business people. There's a book that actually was written in the 70s called Winning Through Intimidation. I don't know if you remember or ever heard of that book. It's a horrible title. And the book really isn't about that, but the book is talking really to people in real estate, and it's saying, listen, you need to understand there's 3 types of business people. So I'll describe the 3 business people for you. One is, and I want you to tell me who you want to work with. One is the type of business person who comes up and says, you know, I'm in this for myself. Don't mess with me. I'm going to try to make as much money as I can. It is about me. It is about my business, and I want to make money, and I don't care if you make money or not. Okay, business type 1. Second business person is a business person who says, you know what? I really care a lot about you. It's really all about you. But you can read through the person right away, and you know they're just thinking about themselves. Okay? But they're saying they care about you. I love you. You know, all that. The third type of business person is somebody who you know, is just spiritual about their concern for the world and their concern for you, and how important it is all about your success. And Ringer asks in the book, who do you want to do business with in the end? So who do you want to do business with?
Number 3, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, I know.
Number 3? So Ringer's point is, in the book, you want to do business with number one, because number one is telling you who they are and where their interest is, and they're absolutely truthful. Number three is the most dangerous one to be in business with, because they have convinced themselves that they're concerned about you. They believe it themselves. So when they're stealing, they've rationalized it. And I actually ended up in business with a person like that. Everybody in the industry loved this guy. And this guy really believed he was wonderful, and everybody else believed he was wonderful. But when push came to shove, and there was a contract situation about 5 years later, and he needed to tell the truth and he needed to come clean, he just backed away and sort of, acted like he didn't really understand, what was going on. But he did, because it was his partner who was trying to screw my business. Okay, and he ended up in another business ultimately, where in Southern California, where he was copying all of my business ideas to the point that he called his business, my business was called Real Works around here, and his business was called American Tire Works. And he was trying to copy everything. He hired a bunch of my people. He didn't really get the business, but in the end, he was trying to declare bankruptcy, and he was keeping cash and pulling it out of the drawer. But he was telling everybody that he was going to pay him back, and he had a lot of people convinced, and he ended up murdered, okay? Because somebody knew in the end what type of business person he is. So, the point is that be very, 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 very careful of the people who are telling you how much they care about you and how it's going to be all about you. Because in the end, if they're in business with you and push comes to shove, they're going to take care of themselves. 99.999% of the time. And so the rule behind that, and the reason he was saying this is, where you get tricked is you get into a situation where you trust somebody and you don't get something in writing. And we'll get it down in writing later. Don't worry about it. I've been in business for a long time. You can trust me. I'm your uncle, right? I'm your whatever. I'm friends with your best friend. I would never do anything. Let's write it down later. And then what happens is later, everybody's making a ton of money. Oh, we didn't, it wasn't I wasn't going to take 3%, I meant 30%. It gets confusing. And so the point that Ringer's trying to say is, if it's the type who says he's going to get you, if it's the type who says he's really cares about you, but he's still only concerned about himself, or even the one who you've convinced and they've convinced themselves that they'll always take care of you. In the end, push comes to shove, they're going to take care of themselves. So it's very important to always get it in writing. And that can be really hard, particularly for some of those of you who are new at this, or are young, or haven't asked some intimidating people to get it in writing. Because people who are intimidating know how to intimidate, and they'll know how to get you to not take it in writing, because they know later that they can adjust it. So I have a suggestion, because I didn't know how to actually deal with that a number of times, and I got pushed on that in the first thing. These guys that my first business in Washington, D.C., were very insistent to not put it in writing, and it didn't need to be in writing. And I ended up opening these 9 stores. I had no money. I borrowed $4,000, and I was able to take that $4,000 and open 9 tire stores. Okay? My partner spent a year making $4,000, so this was all of his money, and mine was money I borrowed from my mother. And so if this thing got changed or switched or something happened, it would have been everything. Well, it turned out, after a year and a half or 2 years, we're making a ton of money. What happened in the business was that the product they were selling, the commodity, ended up dropping in price, and as a result of the drop in price, the volume went up. We were the service, and we were making a boatload of money. These guys came in, and they said, we want to buy your business. We said, and I had gotten it right. I said, well, okay, we'll talk about it. What do you, and I was willing to do a 50-50 partnership, and they said, no, we're going to do 20%. When we were getting it in writing, they had said, you can never, we did all the service for the tire store, so it's like a Costco. They sold the tires and we put them on. And so the deal we made was they said, you can never sell a tire within 5 miles of any location. Okay, sign that. It's a thing called a covenant not to compete within the contract. So we said, we just added a little phrase, and you'll never do service within 5 miles of any of your locations. So that was just signing the contract, and they weren't paying financially. So anyway, what happened was they said, we'll give you 20%. I said, no, we're making all the money now. So we'll take 50% and you'll take 50%. And they go, no. And they said, if you don't do it, we'll just push you out. So this was the really nice guy. He was a partner. They were going to just push us out. They said, we'll just take it over. Well, I just pointed that, because I had it right in a little contract there, and I said, see that right there? You can't do ever any service within 5 miles of your stores. So if you push us out, you don't have service. And it was because of that that we ended up in business. And then they ended up selling their business to another big company, and that company came in and tried to throw us out. And if I didn't have it in writing, I would have lost both businesses. And I ended up getting a lot of money for that, and then moving to California, because I knew the third company that was coming in, eventually there'd be a lawsuit or something. And you know, again, when one person's making a lot and the other's not, it isn't going to work. So that's why we ended up leaving Washington, D.C. But you got to get it right. So while we're working at this place and we're putting this business together, I walk into this office and this old guy, crusty old guy, says to me, Mike, do you know how to fire anybody? And you know, so do you know how to fire somebody?
I've done it.
Okay, but do you know how? Has anybody ever taught you how to fire anybody?
Everyone has a different way.
Okay. Do you know how to fire somebody?
Done it, but I don't know how to.
Okay. Well, let me know, does anybody here want to know how to fire somebody?
Fast.
Okay, fast. That's, yeah. There is a formula, and this guy gave me the formula, and so I'll give it to you because I've probably fired 1,000 people. And I would tell you if I fired 1,000 people, 997 of those people are friends of mine because I follow the formula. And I think if you follow the formula, you know, it'll probably work relatively well for you. The first part of the formula is to understand before you fire the person, when you call somebody in to fire them, they probably know on some level that they're going to get fired, that the relationship's over. They may be in heavy denial, but it isn't working. And if it's not working for you, it's probably not working for them. They're not succeeding. And life is too short for human beings to go around and kid themselves for a long time when they're not succeeding, that they are succeeding. And so there's, on some level, human beings know when they're going to be confronted by somebody who could call them on whatever it is or tell the truth, that something's going to happen. And so the first part of the formula is when somebody comes in to your office or to your desk or wherever you're going to fire them, you tell them within the first or second sentence that it's over. Because there's nothing worse. Has anybody been there where you've had to sit there and talk for a while? How was it? How was the family? Blah, blah, blah. And then you tell them they're fired, and the person who's been fired is like, what was I talking? You know, you're shaking your head. It's terrible, right?
It is not. I think it's very short. We're fine. Done.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it should be. You want to let them know. No, you're shaking your head. I agree. I'm not.
I mean, I'm shaking guys that you don't.
Yeah,
start a discussion. You know, how's your family?
Yeah, no, I understood. I understood. Yeah, I knew we were on the same page. That's it. It is terrible if somebody has to sit there and have a long conversation and then get fired. So first thing is let them know right away they're fired. Second thing is it's important to understand this next thing, which is when somebody's been fired, you ever notice in the cartoons where the wily fox goes over the cliff and he hits the ground and they show the outline of his body and then his skeletal structure crushes and completely crumbles inside? That's really what's happening to a person when they've been fired. They're thinking, this, if they had no idea when they were walking in and you just told them you're leaving or you're no longer going to work here or you're fired, a million thoughts are running through their head at that point. How am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to tell people? You know, the breathing's going to be difficult. It's a really, really, really hard thing. And so, in my opinion, and what this guy told me is when you tell somebody that you then sit there with them for a couple minutes and you say, look, and you know ahead of time, you tell them some of the things that they do really well. Really what their strengths are, what you've seen them do well. And then you may intersperse the one key reason that you finally made the decision that they're fired. You say, you know, look, you're great organizationally, you're a great writer, you know, you're on time, people like you know, the old classic sandwich, right? You tell them a number of good things, but tell them the key thing that they need to work on and why it is and what it is. Because they don't want to do a job that's important, because if they don't do that well or they're not going to fix that, they're going to continue to fail. So you drop that in. And the third element is after, so now you've told them, you understand that not telling them is not a good thing, right? It's a crutch, and keeping them in that job's not good for them, it's not good for anybody that they work with. So you're doing them a favor. But the first thing is you tell them fast, the second thing is you're going to tell them a few good things. The third element is you then shut up. And you shut up for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Because you want to give that person the grace to pull themselves together. And it takes humans between 15 and 25 minutes to sort of gather themselves up. And you let them do whatever they need to do. They may cry, they may laugh, they may want to talk to you about other stuff, they may want to talk to you about the job, they may beg you to keep the job. You keep your mouth shut. You do not change your mind. That's sort of one of the corollaries. You do not change your mind. I've changed my mind 2 times maybe 3. It's been a mistake every time that I didn't follow the rule. It never works. Never. 0 times. Anybody I've ever talked to, it doesn't work. If it wasn't working and you went and reached the point of making the decision, it's over. So just tell the truth and stay there. Let them talk. In 15 to 25 minutes, they'll come out of it and they'll be fine. And then they'll be ready to get up and you can shake their hand, you know, wish them luck and mean it. And then when you walk down the street, and then they'll leave. And then it's over, you know. If you need to have a check ready, have a check ready, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, 5, 10 years later, I've met so many people who come up to me and said, you know, I mean, they like to see me. I run into gas stations. How's it going? Here's what I'm doing. Here's how my family is. I don't have any anger that comes at me by going through that. And a lot of it really has to do with giving them that time. You know, you just boot somebody, tell them you're fired, and walk out of the room. It's not the same. You're not going to get the same response. So it could be a lot of resentment and anger. If you sit there and give that time with that person quietly, makes a big difference. Makes a huge difference in their life. You allow them to go back out in the world with their great, you know, with their honor, their pride, or whatever. And you know, they know you support them. They know you were there. And they'll come back and they will say, you know, it was the best thing you ever did. I mean, so many times I've heard, you know, it wasn't working. I ended up finding something that I really liked. Keeping people around is, you know, it's like giving somebody with heroin who's having a hard time breaking that addiction to keep giving them the money to keep buying the heroin. Doesn't work. Isn't going to work. Somebody's got to say the truth. Okay.
So you're not a big believer in texting
The 50% rule in business plans. So anybody know what that is? Well, it's pretty simple, which is when you get all done and you're putting a business plan together, whether it's a new plan within your business or any kind of thing you're putting together, get all done, do all the work, all the analysis, look at all the expenses, add 50%. You can add 50%, you make money still, do it. You can't, walk it on thin ice. I mean, I have gone through so many plans, I don't want to add that 50%. I don't want to because it's going to make it, I don't know if it'll work. But if I do it, I feel a lot better, and when I don't, it invariably, some things crop up that you just never imagined. The 50% rule just works. You can also apply it to, you know, other things, like if you're doing construction on your house and they say it's going to be done in a year, it won't be. You know, programming, they say it's going to be a year, it won't be. Okay, but I'm mostly talking about putting the dollars and cents together when you're putting a plan together. This is obvious to me again, but you know, I want to emphasize this. It's really, really important when you're putting a plan together to spend a lot of time knowing your competition. Know who they are, know their strengths, know their costs if you can figure out how they are, know their weaknesses. You know, fundamentally the question I think that Jackie was asking, when she was asking each of you almost in your elevator pitch, in a very simple way, how are you going to beat them? Why are you better? You need to know differentiator is, what makes you different, how are you going to be and why are you better. And so that when you lay their costs out and all that stuff, there's something that makes you different. And that something is either going to be, you're either going to be faster, you're going to be cheaper, you're going to have more offerings, you're going to have newer offerings. You know, there's not a lot of things there, you know, but there's something that you've got to do better. Because if you can't do one of those things better, you're going to lose. If you're like, well, I'm not the fastest, no, I'm not the cheapest, no, I'm, you know, do you have the most, no, I don't, you know, I mean, you got to pick something and you got to be the best at it. You got to know what it is. And part of that is that means that you need to know what the other guys have. Because, you know, I mean, we do this a lot at Smart Builders. You know, Rahul and I have been doing this for 5 years now, almost 6, that we've been talking about, you know, when we're competing, what's our cost structure? What's the competition's cost structure? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are our strengths? Are we the white hats in the business or are we the black hats in the business, you know? What's our position going to be? Okay? So, next thing is, I think this is important, particularly for new businesses, as at least in terms of your attitude. Be willing to work for nothing. Because how can anybody beat anybody who's willing to work for nothing? Push comes to shove. Every business that I've succeeded in, I've been willing at some point. I've been willing. I didn't necessarily have to, though. In my first business in Washington, we had 5 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, we were willing to work for nothing, very little. And, you know, at Smart Builders, some of us have taken some big cuts for a while because we wanted to, it was more important that the business succeed than we make our money right now. And to me, that was a tremendous sign of the business, the commitment that people have to the business. People can't beat you when you're willing to not take a paycheck. And so, to me, you know, I've always known when I was competing against Costco on the prices of the tires, and they were coming after us, and we were competing against, you know, all kinds of big companies. I knew that, and my partner Rick and I both were willing to lose money to win. We'd lose money for a while. What we knew in that battle, by the way, is a publicly traded company couldn't go too many quarters with losses. Somebody somewhere along the line was going to get in trouble if that division in Northern California was losing money. And so it was like, you know, we knew we'd win. So it's like, how long do they want to go before they get punished? And I knew I'm willing to take punishment longer. So I think another thing, this is a small point, but if you haven't written a formula for your business, if you don't have some sort of like, you know, I sell X number of these at this price, you know, and times, you know, Y divided by 2 service contracts equals this. If you haven't made up a formula, then I think you need to look back at your business. You need to be able to formulate the thing. Put it in the form of a formula. Okay? It'll again give you strength as you're sitting there and dealing with understanding your business.
Can you explain what it was?
Can I explain? Well, in a lot of businesses, if you're selling a number of contracts, and so let's say you're selling contracts and they're $100 a contract, and so what you have is you have a revenue line like this. You then have to know what your fixed expenses are, you know, rent and utilities and all that kind of stuff. And then you may have variable expenses, which is how much you're paying your salespeople, which is a commission or whatever. And then you know that as your business is growing, you may need more development costs or whatever, so you have to put that in the formula. So what you do is you build a graph and a chart that shows your expenses like that, and then you show a revenue line, so you know, like, you know what the slope is of this line, which is by formula. You know that if you sell 100 of these widgets at $100, you're going to be at this number, but that's going to, you know, and so I'm not sure if I mean, those are the elements of the formula. When you lay them out, you can then figure out what's your break-even point, where you're going to make profit, and, you know, how you can adjust the formula, how you can adjust costs, and what the impact will be.
What was your formula?
For which business?
Pick one.
was, I wanted to talk to you all about it. Who here's read the book The Link? Okay, so a lot of you. I used to tell people in college that when they asked what I was going to do, I said that I was going to get a toll booth on Route 95. That's the interstate from Washington, down to Florida to past Boston, actually. Okay, and I was not a greedy person, so I was only going to get one lane, and all I wanted was a quarter. So every car that came down that lane would just throw a quarter, and that was my business formula. And then what happened was I was working in this tire shop that summer, and we showed up one morning at 7:30 in the morning, and there were 7 tires stacked up next to this balancing machine. And every tire that went on that balancing machine, once the tire got balanced, we were paid $4. Okay, and so there were 7 lined up, and it took about 2 minutes to get a tire balanced. So we started off that day, and we had a contest. 3 of us would pull a car in, and 2 guys would be on each side of the car. It'd be like a pit lane or whatever, and they'd pull the racks out on the tire rack, bring the car up, pull the wheels up, like that. And the other side, just like that. 3 of them working on it really fast, and taking the wheels off, breaking the old rubber off, putting new rubber on, and then rolling it over the tire machine. There was a guy on the tire machine who'd be taking the new ones that came in, whipping them up on this machine, hooking it onto the machine,